only there was somebody here who spent his career hunting people down.
If we had a private investigator, someone with resources available at the tip of his fingers for doing his job. Wait a minute. There's the problem. Doing his job.
That would be the problem. All right, I just sent myself a note.
Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, a podcast where we are breaking down and celebrating the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. Our season 1, we are looking at the film Young Frankenstein, and today we are in minute number 89, where we are going to look at this minute one strangled sadistic guard at a time. I'm Alan Sanders, I'm your host.
And I'm Walt Murray, your co-host.
And joining us once again, one of the co-hosts of the podcast Radio Labyrinth. You can find that in all of your typical podcatchers out there if you do a search for Radio Labyrinth. Welcome back, Jeff Lieboff.
Hey, guys.
Great to have you here continuing with us. We appreciate you guys, you and Tim earlier this week, and you hanging out with us a couple of extra days. I know you're a huge fan of the movie like we are.
Yeah, I definitely love the podcast, love Gene Wilder, love Young Frankenstein.
I'm going to start off right away, Walt. We always talk about what's coming in this minute, and very quickly I'm going to tell you it's going to continue with the guard saying, just like old friends, but it ends with an angry mob, and this is what I alluded to yesterday. This is, to me, probably the most serious the movie ever gets, and probably the darkest when you consider we're watching somebody actually get murdered on screen.
Yeah, this is one of two scenes in this movie that are a little difficult to deal with as a comedy. But
we got one coming later.
Yeah, we got one coming later. But even this is a tough scene.
This is different.
This is different. Yeah, this is the monster actually reaching out and strangling someone to death.
Right, and not quickly. It's not a thunk over the head. It's not a twist of the neck and a snap and drops. It's the Darth Vader with the prisoner in the hallway of the first Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it is a murder.
Yeah.
So it's it's a crazy scene, and maybe the darkest moment of any comedy I've ever seen.
But they definitely prove that you're sided with the monster, though, by making the guy so evil and taunting, and it's almost like he's got it coming when he meets his maker.
Right. It's a nice deft move, both in terms of what we've seen up to this point and in this scene. And I think it's because even the 1974 audience would have been used to seeing the sadistic guard, the guard that likes to torment his captured whatever, whether it's in a legitimate prison, whether it's somebody who's holding somebody to get information or whatever. Everyone can identify with this universal trope, the idea of the sadistic guard. It automatically puts you on the side of the other person, no matter what else that other person has done.
Right.
Yeah, I think that by the time the Frankenstein monster reaches out his hands, I was ready to reach out my hands and strangle the guy. And IMDb and the credits call him the sadistic jailer. He plays the part perfectly.
Now, you want to know what his name is supposed to be?
I would love to know.
According to the script, his name's Rudy.
Huh.
Because
Really?
There's a scene dropped just before this, and maybe that explains kind of why the Frankenstein's monster sort of like pulls back. They're in the interior of the police interrogation room. The two guards who are playing cards are just leaving through the cell door. A third guard, Rudy, remains. First guard, pleasant dreams, Rudy. I'm sure your new friend will be wonderful company. Rudy shouts back, oh, don't you worry about this one. We're gonna get along just fine. Second guard, handing Rudy the keys. Good night, Rudy. Rudy says, good night. The first and second guards leave. Then Rudy to the chained monster. Yeah, we gonna get along just fine, ain't we? If we know what's good for us. Monster goes, Rudy, yeah, none of that. You save that singing for the stage, or I make you sing another song. How you like that? Monster goes, And then we come in, just in a second, he goes, that's what I thought. You settle down now, because we gonna be pals, nice and cozy. So we only come in with halfway through that second line there where he says, you settle down now, because we gonna be pals, nice and cozy. So he's already taunting him before we even get to the scene here that they decided to leave. They cut out all that opening, the 2 guards leaving Rudy behind to just be one-on-one with the monster.
And making it look like he's got coworkers or friends kind of gives him a little too much humanity when you know he's going to be killed in 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I was thinking, too, that, it was a good cut because in the time that we see him on screen in the movie, you already hate the guy. And you kind of already know he's got it coming. So I don't think we lost anything by that scene being cut. Do you think, Jeff?
No,
I think this is another example where, previous minutes we talked about this week, improving the whole Elizabeth, Inga, a lot of that around there, adding some things, worked to take additional lines and add them to the script. Here's an example of where, once again, something scripted that it just slows it down a little. Mm-hmm. Once again, we get right to the action again. We already had the funny scene. We're back to the action. And we can tell within one line. We don't need to know who this guy is from anybody else. We can tell just by how he delivers his line and his intentions, his face, the sneer, the wide-eyed stare. I mean, we don't need any of this other stuff.
And he feels totally comfortable with all those chains on the monster, and he's armed with his baton or whatever that is, and he feels like he's in perfect control of the situation and doesn't expect what's going to happen when he starts the fire.
No, and when Peter Boyle reaches out and grabs him by the throat, he lifts him up, and I don't know how they did it. I assume that there was some sort of box or something for him to jump up on, but you see the immensity of how big Peter Boyle is here again up against the jailer.
Right.
Now, this scene, and we'll stick with this minute, or this moment within the minute of the reaching out. Peter Boyle himself is likely on a raised platform. We already saw him sitting probably kind of on a block on a platform. Mm-hmm. This guy is certainly, the way they shoot it, is already a little bit lower than him. Mm-hmm. When the creature reaches his arms out, not only does the music turn into true horror film music. I mean, there's nothing light. There's no kazoos. There's no weird. This is heavy orchestration to tie into the sense of this horrific thing we're witnessing. And you can see that he's slowly coming up, and Peter Boyle is literally lifting him based on where he starts and ends, at least 2 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the sound. Just the gurgling sound. I mean, the actor himself is doing a great job selling being strangled. The chains are rattling. The music is swelling up, and it's very harsh, very cacophonous. He starts shaking the guy to where the cigarette falls off, the hat falls off. You hear almost a crunching sound as he lets him go. It's a lot to take in for a comedy.
Yeah, they made it very clear that this is still a horror movie as well. Well, a monster movie as well as a comedy.
Yeah, the little shakes, I think maybe just a touch of humor there at the end where the shakes weren't necessary, but he just kind of threw them in there.
Yeah, definitely finishing him off.
Right. So. And the look on the actor's face when he's getting shaken.
Yeah, he plays a convincing.
Wait a minute, what the hell is wrong with you, Jeff? You're laughing?
It's a comedy, Alan.
It's a comedy. This is funny. No, seriously. Huh?
The shakes and then when his hat falls off, it's a little funny.
Okay, note to self. Jeff finds humor in people being strangled on screen.
Well, I think that if it was a character who was more likable,
well, that's true.
Then but I see what Jeff's talking about. You kind of take an odd pleasure in knowing that this guy who was torturing this monster, who didn't ask to be here, none of this is his fault. And the fact that this guy's kind of getting his due and the monster's getting a little relief from his torture. I mean, the guy's chained up and, been assaulted with every vegetable in the city. And so I get it. Yeah, I get it.
Did you notice the monster has figured out how to blow the match out?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh, you didn't notice that?
I didn't catch that.
As he goes to grab him and the match is in his face, the monster has figured out, okay, you know what? I can blow this out.
He sure did.
And because you've put it in my face, you're now within arm's reach. Mm-hmm. This monster has been slowly learning he's been getting smarter this entire time, becoming more aware of his, of his abilities, of what he can and can't do. The little girl taught him how to blow a kiss.
That's right.
So he's learned how to blow out a match now.
Yeah, very true. And in a sense, he let the jailer get close enough that he could
jailer let himself get within the ring. I mean, okay, Walt, let's bring up the FBI. When you're interrogating a prisoner, I mean, don't they know the lengths how close the prisoner can get on his chains before you're within their reach?
Well, I've never interrogated it. Well, I say that. I have questioned people in jail, but now they've got it so much, so locked down that it's a rare occasion when you're really in the room with a prisoner, unless you are one of the detectives or somebody like that. And yeah, they're very careful. They've had so many incidences that have gone so wrong. They're very careful about how they handle prisoners in situations like that.
In this case, Jeff, because we do have the sadistic guard, we also know that people like this become very overconfident when they think they've got the upper hand.
Right.
Like, he doesn't think at all he's in danger. In fact, he's until the split second when his brain probably kicked in and made him realize, you screwed up.
Yep.
He was having a good time.
Yeah. I mean, he is very sadistic, and he is torturing this creature.
Yeah, the lines leading up to the strangulation, which pretty much mirror the script. Rudy takes out a cigarette and prepares to light it. In this case, it's already behind his ear. I think, and Jeff mentioned it last minute, telegraphing to us, something's coming. Why put a cigarette so prominently on the actor's ear? We know this is coming. We already saw when Igor brought a cigarette out and lit a match, so we've got this sort of that callback to earlier with fire. But according to the script, Rudy says, "That's right, just like old friends." That's when he lights the match. The monster, of course, reacts. "What's the matter? You afraid of your little fire? Some monster you are. This can't hurt you, see?" He strikes the match in the monster's face. The monster screams terrified, extreme close-up of Rudy's face, evilly illuminated by the match. "Ooh, he don't like that. See, Mama was right. Little boys ain't supposed to play with matches, is they?" And then he puts the match closer and closer and closer, "'cause they might get hurt." And that's how it plays out in the script. And that's exactly when the giant hands close around Rudy's neck and begins to strangle him. And that is how the scene ends, with him just being strangled at that moment. We don't see him break the chains in the script. That actually does come up here. So I do think it's kind of funny that he's trying to almost like, it's hard to explain why he says that line, but why go, "I guess mamas are right. Little boys shouldn't play with fire." Why is he thinking this guy's a little boy?
Yeah, I couldn't figure that one out either. That was kind of an odd choice of lines there. I don't know if that's alluding to something else in one of the...
Mom say when you're a little kid, don't play with matches.
Right, but the line he delivers, "Mama was right, little boys ain't supposed to play with matches." So it's almost like he's saying, "Oh, you're afraid of these, you're the little boy, but little boys are the ones who play with the matches." I get he's being taunting and he's being very condescending, but it also doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I don't know if that alludes back to one of the other Frankenstein movies or...
See, I don't know. And that's the problem without knowing all of them as well as some of our listeners. But in this case, it's almost like he's saying, "Oh, you're scared of fire." Well, all little boys are scared of fire. But he doesn't say that. He goes, you're scared of, you're scared of this. Little boys ain't supposed to play with matches. Not little boys can get burned, or Mama's right, little boys should be afraid of fire. He doesn't say that. He goes, "Mama was right. You ain't supposed to play with matches." So he's treating him like a little boy, but it doesn't work, because I know I got in trouble. I can tell you this for a fact. I still to this day love playing with fire. I don't know what it is. I just have this little pyromania bug. I keep it in check in case anybody's looking for any unsolved arson cases. That's not me. I have a self-contained outside burning pit that I love, having those little nighttime fires when it's nice in the evenings, especially in the fall. But I used to get in trouble, and I remember the last time I got a really good come to Jesus meeting with my dad and the back end of his belt was when I decided to not only light a little small piece of paper on fire. I realized, because I was in the basement and I had it burning and I was just letting it burn itself out, and I realized, before it burns out, I can add another piece of paper. And then I can add another piece of paper. I didn't realize all that smoke was traveling upstairs, but I just kept adding to my own little small pile of fire. I'm literally lighting my freaking basement, well, my mom and dad's basement on fire, thinking how cool this is, and didn't realize, again, as a little kid, that smoke actually does travel upstairs.
Yeah, you can't get away from that one. get away with that one for long.
No.
So, yeah, so when and I will blame my friend Tom.
Is this the same guy that you
This
watched
is
all
the same
bad
guy.
movies?
Yes, this is the guy who if I was in trouble for something, it was probably Tom who was either there or starting it. And my parents were both gone different places. I think my mom was shopping and my dad was a triathlete, so he's out training one afternoon, and Tom and I and my brother decided that fireworks were in order. So long and short of it, our yard caught on fire. And I don't mean just a little fire. I mean, our yard was on fire and a neighbor called the fire department. And we're trying to douse it. We were trying to find anything and everything we could find to dump water on it. We were getting pots and pans out of the kitchen. We got the wheelbarrow, which was full of rainwater, and tried to bring it up. And finally the fire department got there and put it out. And as the fire truck is pulling away, going one direction, my mom is pulling in from the other direction, and she's looking at it. The yard, of course, is a charred mess. And she looks at us, and I'll never forget her face. She just looked at me, and she goes, "What just happened?" I said,
"What did you do?"
I said, "Somehow the yard caught on fire." And she had this look
I swear,
like...
it just happened. Yeah. Thank God I was home.
Yeah.
It's lightning.
Yeah.
It was lightning.
Her look was kind of like...
Perfect sunny day.
Disposing of 3 bodies is going to be very difficult. And she said, "I'm just going to let your dad handle this."
Oh, I was waiting for that.
And she grabbed
the
her stuff
universal
and was
line that fills every kid with dread. Wait till your father gets home.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, when Dad came pulling up a few minutes later, he said, I mean, there was nothing I could do but take ownership on this one. He said, "Well, I was looking at burning the yard next week anyway, so you got out of this one, but I'll make you work it off." And I'm like, oh, crap. I'd rather just taken a beating.
This reminds me, I actually got in trouble doing something similar as well. See, I've always been a firebug.
Yeah.
My dad, I blame my dad on this one, God rest his soul, since he's no longer with us. But we used to have these problems with these silkworms that would get into our hedges. Mm-hmm. And so my dad, as opposed to doing the most reasonable thing, which would be you go to your local hardware store, you buy the appropriate toxin or bug killer that you spray on your bushes. He had those little propane torches that you can it has a little end, and it's like a little small propane tank that you kind of screw the end to, and you click it, it automatically ignites, and you can adjust the flame. It's used for welding more than anything, right? Mm-hmm. And he would go burn the bugs. Well, one day I'm sitting home, as is the case by myself in the summer, as I'm the oldest, I'm the most responsible. And I'm out there and I'm like, oh, wow, there's all these worms crawling through the shrubs. I'll just do what Dad does. I went downstairs, grabbed a little torch, and I started burning these things. But I didn't realize all the dead vegetation underneath the bushes. Yeah, those are also very susceptible to flame.
Yes, they are.
So while I had this little childhood glee of helping my dad get rid of all these worms in the bushes, all of a sudden, once again, where's all that smoke coming from? I had gone about 15 yards up from where I started, and then I look behind me. Everything is burning along where I was just using the torch. And then my neighbor, I hear her yell, "Ernie, the yard's on fire!" I'm like, oh, crap, oh, crap, oh, crap. And so I had to run. I got the garden hose, and thank God the hose was right close to the hedge line, and I was able to put it out myself. But I'm like, oh, please don't tell my parents. Oh, please don't tell my parents. But yeah, I did a dumb thing like that.
Yeah, no, when we did it, we made sure we did it at the worst time because it was the middle of winter, so the hose was turned off from the inside. So that was awesome.
Jeff, I got to ask, are you a firebug at heart?
Not really. I do remember one time Tim and I had a friend named Stu that lived down the street from me, and we were trying to camp out in his front yard, and we couldn't, even though both of us were Boy Scouts, we couldn't get a fire going. So he had the idea to use a match and a can of Lysol to light the fire.
I saw this in a movie once.
And get a pretty good blowtorch that kind of thing going from a can of Lysol and a match. Don't do this at home, kids. But yeah, we sprayed the fire with Lysol a couple times, and then flaming Lysol. And just so happened that was one of the points when his parents looked out the window and camping trip's over.
You boys are done.
But you got a good fire going.
You know what though? You guys are so lucky. You know how many people get really badly injured when that flame sucks back into the can because you don't learn to take your finger off in time?
Definitely does. And later on in life when I worked in the grocery store, occasionally they would put the trash that they had collected into incinerator, and sometimes there would be like a can of Lysol or some other kind of air freshener can that would end up in the trash.
Mm-hmm. Something under pressure.
Yeah, and those things would blow up in the incinerator. You'd be walking by or in the bathroom, which happened to be right next to the incinerator, and you just hear the big boom.
And suddenly we're back to Tim Andrews having to leave the theater to go buy new underwear. Because if that were to happen, well, I'm walking. Well, thank God I'm in the bathroom when that's going on.
Yeah, that'll get your attention.
Oh. Wow. Yeah, kids, again, important safety lesson. Don't do what we did. We're dumb asses. That's why we're doing a podcast about a movie 1 minute at a time.
Yeah, this is why many times I've had to tell my daughter, okay, I'm going to tell you the story, but you cannot do this.
Yeah.
Learn from my stupidity.
You know, that's another thing that used to tick me off about my dad. He bragged, because he grew up growing up in the late 50s, early 60s, the whole fixing up your car, getting the hot rods and stuff. And he used to tell my brother and I all the time about how cool it was to lay rubber in their cars. He'd be like, we try to see if, because they had stick shifts, of course, all back then. He said, we would always try to get the maximum rubber and see how many gears we could still tear rubber. And he was telling us about this very first time I ever accidentally barked outside of the driveway where I kind of hit the gas too hard. Don't let me ever catch you doing that. I never did that when I was your age. Yeah. Like, wait, Dad, you either lied to us then or you're lying to us now. Which is it? Don't you contradict me.
See, the operative word for me would have been, don't let me catch you. All right, we're headed to Blackjack Mountain.
You took me to see Smokey and the Bandit. What did you expect?
Doctor, you're gonna be talking out of your ass. Daddy, the top came off. No shit.
That's right.
True story, he did.
Oh, great movie.
When I came home from seeing Smokey and the Bandit, my brother and I immediately got on our bikes, and we realized, well, we can't pedal fast enough to lay rubber, but we can go fast and hit our brakes and leave rubber, and that to us was the coolest thing until my dad came home and goes, who the marked up the driveway? we couldn't win as kids.
You had flat tires.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we can get back to the minute here if we'd like to. In this scene, the guard, of course, not only does he realize the match is what certainly has a taunting effect on the monster, he reaches his arm with that first match in close to the monster, but he hasn't stepped close to the monster. So he lights the second match, and he leans that second match in, and he still hasn't moved closer, which means this entire time he's been within the monster's grasp.
He's been in range. So.
Well, the monster makes pretty easy work of the chains anyway, so it's like...
Yeah.
He makes me wonder why he didn't do that before. Is he just... He wasn't taunted, I guess. Not enough.
You know, as crazy as this sounds, I was kind of thinking about the similarities this week between Peter Boyle as the Frankenstein monster and the Incredible Hulk. And there have been a couple of times when he hasn't really used his full strength until he gets riled up. And, when he went and broke out of the castle and knocked the door off the hinges and things like that. And normally he's very gentle and sedate, but when you get him riled up, that's when you see the full weight of his strength and ability.
Yeah, I have not been able to not have that parallel ever since that line, that poor monstrous Hulk, that lifeless Hulk downstairs.
That's right.
And lifeless Hulk. The only time I ever heard that term is the Incredible Hulk. So I've kind of, you can't help but make that illusion.
Yeah, so there is kind of that similarity there between those two beasts. Hulk smash, and now Frankenstein smash. So, well, Jeff, I was wondering, Alan and I have kind of talked about this a few times. What are your thoughts about Peter Boyle as the monster here?
I love Peter Boyle. I was always a big fan of his. I think maybe it started with Young Frankenstein, but I also love him in Where the Buffalo Roam. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, great movie.
Yeah, he plays Bill Murray's sidekick lawyer. That's based on Hunter Thompson and Dr. Gonzo.
Right.
You've mentioned that before, Walt.
Yeah, it's a good movie, and he is great in it.
In fact, I think you mentioned it during the minutes we had Tom Taylor on from the Indiana Jones Minute, because we were talking about, I think your line was, I'm still trying to decide if it's a good movie or not, because it's always watchable, but I get done, I'm like, yeah, but it's a Hunter S. Thompson kind of story. How do you know if it's good or not? It's just crazy.
It is true. That is true. So.
I guess I learned that it wasn't a great movie when I recommended it to someone, because I'm a huge Bill Murray fan also.
I learned, that's a great line. I learned it wasn't good based on the fact that I recommended it to someone.
I did. I recommended it to somebody, and they watched it, and they said, "Why did you recommend this movie? It was terrible."
I'm never going to listen to a suggestion from you again.
I've had that happen. I've just had to embrace the fact that I've got a very odd sense of humor, I think.
Yeah, at this point in our lives, I usually end up, everything has a caveat. I say, I loved it. Now, you might not, but I think it's worth watching.
Yeah. Well, and Jeff, you probably get some of this based on the fact that y'all do cover a lot of different movies and stuff on your podcast. I'm sure you get all kinds of feedback of people just angry over some of the suggestions that you make or movies that you like or don't like.
Right. We try and have every week we try and suggest something to the listeners of what they should check out, and occasionally we'll pick something that we haven't watched yet that's coming up. Like one time I recommended Kathy Bates' show on Netflix where she owned a pot dispensary. Yeah. And then I watched that and had to roll back my recommendation.
Yeah, I made it through almost through the first episode of that, and I that was enough for me. And you know, I used to not really like Kathy Bates that much, but over the last 10 or 15 years, I've really come around on her. But this show kind of set me back a little bit. I did not. I did not enjoy that show at all.
Yeah, the laugh track just was terrible.
It was very annoying.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, I agree with you. I think Peter Boyle was the perfect pick for the monster.
Right. He was a great actor and such a big, looming presence. Perfect casting, I thought.
Yeah.
I want you to all take a second, if you haven't done this already. I've got a note here since we're going to get back to Peter Boyle ripping his chains off. How many times in your life does dropping these kinds of chains to the ground sound like electricity from the mad scientist's lab?
I kind of thought about that too. That is
this is the exact same sound effect when they had the weird superimposed Terry Garr's head, and they had that light behind her, and then it faded, and we hear this crackle. This is not the sound of chains dropping. This is the same sound effect. And I listened to it over and over again. It's crackled lightning from the lab.
I wonder why they did that.
Well, I was going to ask you, first of all, had you noticed it?
I did notice it, and I didn't put together that that's what that sound was, but now that you mention that, I can see that. I don't know. Because, I mean, how hard is it to tape record the dropping of chains?
Right.
I mean,
that's a typical kind of Foley effect that's not really hard to come up with.
I mean,
it's not like you're creating laser bolts in space, right?
Right. And in the Foley studio, they've got to have 50 different chains that they could use for that sound effect.
Right. That's weird.
I don't have any notes from behind the scenes or Mel Brooks or anything. The only thing I can think of is when the monster was first being reanimated or brought to life. They had all the sound of electricity going, right? Of course, he didn't come to life right away, but the last time we heard this sound was when they were trying to bring him to life, to give him life, to take him from this poor, hulking, lifeless thing. And here he is, sort of being tormented. He's not sticking up for himself. He's not doing anything for himself. All of a sudden, when he finally, I can blow out the match. I can strangle my tormentor. I am in control of my life. Now, the same electrical sound is there where now, hey, I'm not Frankenstein's creature. I'm my own person. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but certainly I get the sense because he has a sense of pride in himself. This last shot of him after he pulls all the chains off and that sound goes away, he gives himself sort of a smile like, yeah, I'm nobody's to toy with anymore.
That's right. He really does have a look of satisfaction, and I don't know if joy is the right word, but definitely a very happy look on his face.
Yeah, look what I just did.
Yeah.
And the way they shoot it too, with looking up at him, gives you the illusion of his massive size of the creature, you know?
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, he's towering in the scene. He is once again, instead of shooting down, because remember when he was sitting and he was pretty much, being tormented, the camera angle was pretty well down. He made him look small. And it wasn't until he rose up and then, we see how big he is in front of Rudy, the poor guard here, who, I say poor guard, the guard who ends up being strangled. We see his enormity and it's reinforced with this particular shot. But he has pride in himself. It's the first time the monster looks proud, I guess. Is that a good is that a good way to explain it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
And I don't know if maybe that's why the sound designer said, you know what? Where Frankenstein himself, or Frankenstein back then, used the electricity to give his creation life, that same sound is now giving the creature control over now his own life. It may be a stretch, but that's about the only thing I can come up with.
No, that's a good thought.
That's like a Stretch Armstrong stretch, but
that is a Stretch Armstrong stretch. But there's a reason that they did that, because it certainly is not a chain sound.
In fact, I don't know, Jeff, if you've got a chance, and we could pause for a sec for you to go listen, but just listen to it, and it mirrors right the exact same sound as effect of when the creature's being brought to life when they're down, showing Terry Garr's head being superimposed on the piece of gear that was created specifically for young Frankenstein.
Right. And maybe it's supposed to show like when he uses his strength like that, it's like an electrical reaction because of the lightning that brought him to life.
That's an interesting thought.
Unfortunately, it doesn't exist in the times when he breaks down doors and things, but...
Right.
I wish there was an explanation. I wish somebody had mentioned something along the way.
Or maybe someone has, and I just hasn't. I didn't find it. So certainly, again, our loyal listeners out there in the Wilder Ride listeners group, maybe you've heard the story and know. But it just struck me weird because, again, watching a movie straight through, I never caught that until I went and looked at this minute and was really paying attention. And as I was listening, I said, "Wait a minute, that's not chains dropping. That's like the fuzzy electrical sound."
Interesting choice on their part.
Because it kind of works if you're not paying attention, but if you are, you realize, no, that's the same electricity from the lab when the attempt to reanimate him was going on. And I didn't know if it was just, maybe, who knows, maybe Mel Brooks or anybody else didn't catch it, just the sound designer thought there was something cool behind it. I don't know the story, and it's killing me because it's so obvious not chains dropping to the ground.
Well, if...
It is now. Now you'll never be able to go watch that scene and not hear the electricity.
Well, I think the smartest
Sorry if
thing
I've done
would
that to
be
you folks.
if everybody would just go to Twitter and hashtag Mel Brooks, please come on our podcast.
Yes, please, Mel.
That would be awesome. And maybe we could ask him.
I would love.
I've Twittered and Facebooked some Twitter guilted some people into coming on Radio Labyrinth, so it was on occasion.
That would be awesome if we could. I don't care if it's through guilt or other means. I would love to get him on to ask questions like this.
Right now, there may be a paycheck in it for him. It may not be a substantial paycheck. We may be able to gather all of our pennies from the
$2. I'm not doing anything
from the Patreon page and say we're going to defer to this month's income to go to Mel Brooks to please take 10 minutes to just sit on a computer and chat with us.
That would be awesome.
Well, I can't figure it out. I haven't been able to find it out, but if you go back and listen, everybody, right around, and it's taking place right around seconds 44 through maybe 47, you hear that exact electrical, and if you don't believe me, back up the movie to when they're reanimating him in the lab. It's the exact same sound effect.
That's interesting. Somebody out there has to know the answer to this. So if you do know the answer, please go on the Wilder Ride listener page and let us know.
The only person who may know may be dead.
Yeah, maybe.
Who was the Foley artist for this movie?
All right, so for sound on this movie, you had 3 different folks, all underneath the, quote, sound department. You had Gene Cantamisa, who was a production mixer. You had Don Hall, who was the sound editor, and Richard Portman, who was the production re-recording artist. So those are the 3 folks. And let's see if I've got any of them are still alive. Gene Cantamisa died in 2011, so we can't ask him. Don Hall,
there's no date
he
of
may
death
still
right
be, there's no date of death, so he may still be alive. We might be able to reach out to Don Hall. And then Richard Portman, he passed away just last year at this recording in 2017. So the only person we have a chance of reaching out to is Don Hall. The end of this minute now, because we do want to wrap up this minute. We've still got another minute to get to before the end of the week. We have this moment where we fade to black on a very proud Frankenstein's monster who's really happy at what he's been able to do. He's free. He snapped his chains like they were paper chains, like the kind of chains we used to make back in 3rd grade to decorate our, Christmas tree in the classroom. He just makes mincemeat out of it. We do a slow fade on a very proud face, and then we fade in to what looks like the town hall, because we've got the clock tower. The clock looks like it reads 9:30, although it's weird. If you look at the way the clock needles are, it almost looks like the shorthand is already on the 10, not in between, but it's the long hand's on the bottom towards the 6. So I'm going to call it 9:30. What say you, Jeff?
Or 10:30. It could be either one.
I think it's 10:30.
You think it's 10:30? Because it's not past the 10 yet. All right, fine. We'll go with 10:30. We'll say it's 10:30. It's late at night. But it's strange because the shorthand for those folks that are not premillennials that don't know how to read analog clocks anymore, but the shorthand is right on the 10 when it should be between the 10 and the 10 and the 11 if it's 10:30. So that's why I thought maybe it's 9:30 approaching 10. But anyway, the clock's messed up. I don't think it's right.
Yeah, no, it is messed up. Yeah. I think it's 10:30, but it is messed up.
But we established very quickly in about 5 seconds, really, the last 5 seconds when the camera's panning down from the clock tower, we see as they enter the bottom of the frame, we see torches lit, we see axes, we see scythes, we see rakes and other implements of destruction, sticks, and then as we do a reverse shot, as if coming from the town hall looking out to the angry mob, we see a bunch of folks who have escaped Oktoberfest all angry about something.
Right.
Walt, I know there's people outside, and I know that's distracting for you, but I really want you to focus on what we're doing over
I was
here.
trying to figure out why that kid was trying to get in my car.
What? Oh, did he think it was the wrong car? I think he thought it was the wrong car. I have to tell you a funny story about that one day. So yeah, look at all these guys. They're all dressed like they just escaped from either a bad Oktoberfest or the maybe play rehearsal for Young Frankenstein just got out.
Yeah, I noticed that two of the guys right at the front are in lederhosen. So people here dress a little formal all the time.
They've all got bowler hats or other kind of hats on there. This is the angry mob.
Yeah, I'd kind of figure if it was 10:30 at night and an angry mob, you're going to get guys who are a little bit more casual, but maybe they just came from the pub.
There's a couple ladies in the crowd as well. There's a little old lady with like a picnic basket.
Yeah, one of the angriest people in the mob is a lady.
Yeah.
Where are you looking? I don't see that.
You'll see.
I'm slowing it down.
I think she's right there.
Is that her? There's one right there.
Right
oh,
there.
I see that one leaning. Okay, yeah I do. One is dead center between the two guys with the bowler hat. She's got like a little, I guess like just a cloak over her head a little bit.
She is pissed.
And then there's another one leaning behind the guy wearing the little bit of the lighter colored suit, like maybe a gray suit with the dark lapels, wearing his bowler hat. He's got a rifle he's holding up in the air. So, I hadn't noticed. I hadn't noticed that woman kind of leaning in with her picnic basket. Wow.
And that one guy with the axe.
Yeah, this is your stereotypical angry mob. They are not happy at this time of night, and they are ready to go after someone.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to see who they're really looking for guidance here.
Well, let me ask this question as we start to wind this minute down, because we're gonna have some time to talk about it tomorrow. The time of night. We know it's nighttime when the monster is being confronted with the sadistic guard. When we know that, because it was nighttime just a few minutes back when Elizabeth is showing up. We know it's nighttime because of how dark it is and the other guards have already left. We assume this guard is left, and if we know from the script, they're wishing him a good night. Now, that was left out of the film. It's nighttime. He's killed this guard, and the last possible second before we transition to this town hall, or this angry mob scene in the town square, it can't be but the same time. It's not a week later. It's not a day later when he's escaped and they realize there's a murder that's taken place. I mean, this is almost simultaneously taking place.
Well, we've already kind of determined in this movie that time is a little fluid. So
the chain of events don't necessarily have to line up with start and order.
You would hope that they would, but no, they're not. They don't always make a whole lot of sense.
You know what? I think we need to say, we'll start our discussion on this tomorrow, because it bothers me that we've kind of jumped to this conclusion unless we can think of something else. And maybe that's your homework assignment for tonight. If you coming back tomorrow, I want to know, why is this town hall gathered the exact same night that the creature is just now escaping? He hasn't even escaped the cell. He just killed the guard and ripped his chains out, and we're already to an angry mob. So, Jeff, are you available to come back and wrap up this week? I know it's been a long week so far. We've had a lot of really in-depth discussion, but you got one more episode left in you?
Yeah, if you guys will have me for another one, I'll do another one.
For you guys at the Radio Labyrinth, we will go through any twisting maze to keep you here.
All right.
Wow, that fell flat. Cut that one. That's just a joke.
No, I'm with you.
I feel like the guys went back through editing this script. For every 3 jokes fail, we only kept the one that worked. So,
Right.
Well, we definitely would love to have you back, Jeff, because we've really enjoyed your insights, as we have with all of our guests. If someone's out there, we've mentioned Radio Labyrinth a couple of times, where can people go check on some of your episodes? Or maybe if they just want to start listening now, because tomorrow is Friday, maybe they're getting ready for tomorrow's episode and they want to subscribe subscribe, how do they do that?
You can go to iTunes and search for Radio Labyrinth, and you can subscribe to us. And if you want to rate or review us on iTunes, we always appreciate that. And what we do on Radio Labyrinth is we'll rate your reviews. So if you go on iTunes and write us a little short review of the podcast, we'll read it on the air, and then all the hosts will give their. On iTunes, you can give up to 5 stars. So we have a similar
rate the comment.
Your reviews up to 5 stars.
That's awesome. Well, I know we tend to, whenever someone gives us an updated or one that we find worthwhile, we'll repost it in our listeners page. So that's something we should bring up too. Maybe, I don't know. We don't get enough of them just yet, so we'll have to hold off. But I do like acknowledging, and it is important, folks, for any podcast you listen to, that it helps if you're searching for a particular kind of podcast. Maybe you are searching for podcasts about Gene Wilder, or podcasts about Young Frankenstein, or about Mel Brooks or Terry Garr or whatever. By leaving a review with a comment, not just the star rating, but the comment, this podcast gains more credibility to the iTunes gods, to the Apple gods, and they may allow someone else to find us better. So please do that.
Yeah, and the other place that people could go that would be helpful, we've talked about this earlier this week, is that if you'd like to join us at patreon.com/The Wilder Ride, there's a little community growing there, and if you wouldn't mind just, if you have an extra $1 a month laying around, that would be real helpful to us to cover some of our cost.
And we would appreciate that. And of course, Facebook, Twitter, and everything else on social media, we're out there. We want to come back tomorrow because we need to find out what this town hall is all about. I can tell you it starts with the return of Inspector Kemp. So he's worth coming back tomorrow just to get Inspector Kemp. Don't forget to get your decoder ring to find out what the heck he's saying. And we will end with Elizabeth saying to Freddie, "Darling, you mustn't worry." So again, another jam-packed minute coming your way tomorrow, and we will be back here same time, we always release it first thing in the mornings, but depending what time you listen, we'll call it same bat time, same bat channel. So come on back tomorrow for the Wilder Ride.
Same monster time, monster channel.
Same monster time. Well, once again, time makes no difference to me.
It is very fluid.
It's very fluid.
9:30, 10:30. Whatever.
It's all the same.
Wherever you happen to be.
For the wildest ride you'll ever take.
Well, that only happens after dark.
Well, it's 9:30.